this is Laurie Mangold. This is month 2 of $5 Quilt, and this is the assembly video and the how-to video and the kind of tips and tricks and tool video. So this month, the instructions, this is what they look like. This is the Tula version. We have them colored again for your specific one, and the instructions are here. Now, unfortunately, for the San Antonio class, I forgot to put the little arrows in as to which direction to press your seams. We will be posting that on the Facebook page or in the website under $5 Quilt, which directions to press them. So I'll show it to you in this video, but I apologize. I woke up in the middle of the night and went, oh no, I forgot to put your little arrows in, but we're getting there. All right. So there's already a video out there on how to cut, so we have all of our pieces. So step 1 is strip piecing, and that's taking the 2.5 by, I believe it was 10.5 inch strips that we cut. And we're going to put them right sides together, and we're going to sew our 1/4 inch seam up the whole thing. Now, we're going to be pressing pretty much in all of this most of the time. We're going to be pressing towards the bright color, or color number 1. It's the Citron in the Tula. So I put this down, I set my seam, and then I lifted this up and I just pressed the edge of my little iron against this to press this flat. Now we need to cut this into 4 2.5 inch segments. So I'm going to put it on its side. I'm going to clean cut the edge, and remember, we do that by putting the line on the seam. So I'm going to get an edge off of there, and real quickly I'm going to cut 4 2.5 inch segments. And again, I always want to be sure I've got the straight line on my seam. That way everything's nice and perpendicular. Okay, 2, 3, and 1 more is 4. Okay, perfect. All right, so now I have 4 of these units. Now we're going to play the jigsaw puzzle game again, because if we don't, we're going to get things going kind of all in the wrong direction. I'm going to do it just right here on the mat. I do like having my board to do that on, and especially for class, so I can hold it up and it doesn't slip and slide. But the next step is that, again, we're going to, like last month, we're going to take 2 of these. So we have one that goes this way, one that goes this way, one that goes this way, and one that goes this way, all right? And what's important here is that we have to come and we have to sew one of our 2.5 by 4.5 inch color 2s on the outside of each of these. So you'll have 2 on the right and 2 on the left. Okay, so you're going to sew those together just like that. Okay, this will measure 4.5 inches, each one of these corners. Everything today that we sew before we start doing rows will measure 4.5 inches. Okay, so that's pretty much the same thing we did last month. One of the things that's different this month is the in-between blocks. They are, oh, I'm like, did I not put that in? That was step number 1. I missed it completely. You're going to take the 4 of the color 1 and 4 of color 3, and we're going to sew these together in what we would probably typically call a rail fence block. So you're just going to put these right sides together, and you're going to sew a 1/4 inch seam, and then there will be one between all of the blocks. Now the light is always going to go to the inside, okay, like this. We're going to go like this. All right, I'm going to move these up, and we're going to go like this. Okay, so you will have these all sewn together. Now, that kind of puts us right in position that it's time. We have our 4.5-inch square that goes in the middle, and all of a sudden, very quickly, we have our block that's going to go together, okay? So we can sew it in rows. Now this is a good opportunity. I just noticed that these birds where I'm sitting, depending on what, if you want to consider a block that's up or down, but I flipped that over so the birds were kind of flying right for me where I'm sitting. So your time to do that, all right? So you're going to sew these together, and all things will measure 4.5 inches. Now, different from last month is that when you sew this together, when we start to sew the rows, when you sew this to this, and I actually have one of those done. When you sew that to that, look what happened. We have a match point here, which we didn't have last month, okay? So we just did a whole skill builder video on how to match seams, but you are going to notice that if you press towards the bright green or color, it's color 2 for all the colors, that you're going to be able to put those 2 little folds across from each other and wiggle them so they're nice and tight. Do you see how nice and tight they are? That way when you sew, they are going to stay there. Now, one of the things we're featuring a little bit this month, or we're talking about, are pins. I like to pin on each side of that match point, and you'll see that in the skill video. And so that when I go to sew and I get to here, okay, I can stop and take this pin out. This pin protects my seam from being pushed apart by the presser foot, and then I can continue to go. And the goal of a nicely matched seam, and I'm going to do this here, is that you have all 4 of your points kissing each other here. There's no gap between them, and they're not overlapping each other. And so for your top and bottom rows, you are going to have match points there. And we didn't have that last month. So that's why we're featuring and we're talking about match points, because you have a lot more of them to do this month. Okay? So that is going to give you that. I thought I had the other one done. Oh, they're here. Okay, so I'm going to kind of sneak some of this away because I actually have, I've done the middle row also, okay, for the matching seam video, so that's already done. The only one I don't have completely sewn is this one, but I do have these sewn together, so we can pretend here, can't we? So all of that is sewn together, okay? All right. So same as last month, now we're going to put our rows together. But this is going to really challenge you a little bit in that we have to match a seam here, we have to match it here, we have to match it here, and we have to match it here. So we have 4 match points. And in my opinion, it's very important that when you go to sew this, that you take the time first to make sure all of your match points are pinned down. And I like to pin from the inside, and you'll see that too, because I have a guide on my presser foot and I don't want the guide to hit.
Oh, show it towards the camera.
Towards the camera.
Yeah, there you go.
There you go. See how traditionally we pin like this, right? That's how we've all been taught to pin. If you have a presser foot with a guide on it, this gets in the way. And so if you just flip that around and press it like, or pin it like that, then that's not going to hit your guide as you go on underneath it. Now, you should take your pins out and not sew over them, okay? As a proper Bernina and baby lock dealer, we are supposed to teach you to take your pins out and not sew over them. Does everybody pay attention to that? Not necessarily. Have I knocked my machine out of time because I was going fast and hit a pin? Absolutely. So just know, sew over pins at your own risk. But as you know, in the matching seams video, if I were to just start sewing and try to match these as I went, I promise by the time I got to the last one, things wouldn't go good. And if you're putting a whole quilt together and you're going across and you've got all these match points where your sashing comes together and you don't pin them first, you will be shocked how far off you are by the time you get to the end. So pinning your match points lets you identify any areas that may not quite be even or sewn right, and it allows you to disperse that unevenness between the seams and not push it all to the bottom of the quilt. So you're going to sew that one, sew that down, and then you're going to come back and you're going to sew this one on this side, right? And then when you're all set and done, we have such pretty blocks. I'm going to sweep that out of the way, and Monica made these for me. And here is the finished block all put together with all nicely matched seams. Okay, so that's your skill this month, is learning to really work with matching seams and getting those seams going in opposite directions. Sometimes you won't be told which way to press, and so if I'm putting my rows together, oftentimes I will bring them over to my pressing surface and I'll go, okay, if this wants to go this way, then I'm going to press this one this way and this one this way, and you may have to make those determinations yourself to get them to go in opposite directions. Okay, so that's this one's block, 12.5 inches. And I also did a skill building video on 1/4 inch seams, and we talk a little bit about why maybe yours isn't measuring exactly 12.5 inches. And I don't want to repeat myself, but it would be worth going and watching that. All right, so what else do we have? Couple of things that we're featuring this month. There are all different kinds of pins out there in the world. We actually have some cute ones there. And for all different reasons, okay? And what I say to you is, when you find a pin that you love, stay with it. When I'm pinning for piecing, I want a very thin and a very, very sharp pin so that I can go in and out. You saw how easily I went in and out of that fabric, so that I'm not pushing things out of the way or distorting things when I pin. This is probably the sharpest pin made, the Clover one. It is very, very thin, very, very sharp. I mean, you can go through your finger and not even know it. But they're really for piecing. They're not, if you're doing a lot of garment or crafting where you're pinning thick fabrics, they're going to bend. They're that thin. So really for piecing. We have the new magic pins. Again, we have them in regular and extra fine, and they're fun because they're real easy to pull out with this end on it, and it's also silicone, so it's heat resistant.
Those are my new favorite.
They're your new favorite, okay? Fork pins. When you're pinning seam match points, this fork pin has 2 pins in one, and you can pin that on both sides of your seam and hold both ends down with 1 pin. And that comes, I like these for matching seams. That makes life a lot easier. And then in the Blue Bonnet Shop Hop, this we had these, and these are what they call flathead pins. And the advantage of this is I use these a lot when I'm having to, if I'm pinning something and I have to trim it and it's pinned. A lot of times this happens when you are cutting out a pattern, a garment pattern. If you have a flathead pin, you can lay your ruler down and cut, and the ruler's not bouncing back and forth because this is round. So we use flathead pins. They're actually very sharp. They go in very well. But we use these a lot whenever you're pinning a pattern on something and then having to cut it out. So that's a flathead pin. So lots of cool different types of pins. And like I say, once you find one you love, stick with it. And I have a pin cushion for my flathead. I have a pin cushion for my really, really sharp ones. And then I have a pin cushion for all the other stuff I've managed to collect over the years.
And my circles for that.
Yes. All right, seam rippers. Seam rippers do get dull over time. And we love the Clover seam rippers because they are so sharp. And the sharper your seam ripper, the quicker you're going to get to be able to rip things out. And it's not just a matter of the sharpness comes in here where you cut the thread. But the other thing that's important is that the point is very small and sharp to get under the tiny little stitches. If that point is big and clunky, it's much harder to get under a stitch. I can show you real quick if I pop this open. You can see if I wanted to unsew this, how easy I can just slide that under. And I go about every 5 or 6 stitches. and I can just see how it just pops, how fast that is. And then I can go to the other side. I can't believe I'm unsewing my block, but that's okay. If I go to the other side, all I have to do is find a place where I popped a stitch and pull up, and now this will just pull right out. And it's unsewn just that fast. So a good seam ripper makes a big difference. Last thing I want to feature for those of you that don't come to class is Project Bag 2.0. The cool thing about, or the fun thing about coming back and forth to class or building a project is having a project bag to store everything in. And we have so many people that have made these. These have a vinyl front on them. You can make them with little decorations or plain, but each time you finish a block, you can put it in here. It keeps it nice and flat and keeps it nice and clean and organized together. And it's really fun to make. And you can make them in all different sizes. And so this pattern is a by any pattern. We carry the zippers, we carry the foam, we have the vinyl, so everything you need to put one of these together. And we highly recommend it. So that's the block this month. Next month we're definitely taking a step up in complexity, but it's not going to be too hard. And if you are interested in the advanced program, when you pick up your block, ask for a sign-up sheet, and you can register. And then next month when you come after this, you will be picking up your regular block and you'll be picking up your advanced block. So that's what I have for you this month. Thanks.